So, ladies and gentlemen, it is, I think it's episode 129 of the Demons from Outer Space. We've been pretty good about this lately. My odds are pretty dead to one, you know? I'm like Han Solo, never tell me the odds, because they're always in my favor, just like Han Solo. And the Chewie to my Han, Dylan McCandless, Super DM64, also here on the cockpit of the USS Demon from Outer Space.
Yeah, I could have done a Chewbacca impression right there, but I chose not to embarrass myself.
Yeah, well, what you should have done is like a Jet Jaguar sound, since Kong Jaguar is our mascot. And realistically, we're not on the bridge of the Millennium Falcon. We are, in fact, we're like on the shoulders of Kong Jaguar as he's floating through space. It's like a really shitty version of like the space whale from season 5 of Doctor Who.
I feel like whatever sad attempt I made at trying to do the Chewbacca noise would be more successful than me trying to pull off the Jet Jaguar screech. So
yeah, but I feel like I would respect you more if you tried the Jet Jaguar noise as opposed to Chewbacca, because any video where somebody makes a Star Wars joke or a Han Solo reference, somebody will try to do the Chewbacca noise, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, you're very clever and very original. But if you had tried to do a Jet Jaguar watcha-ching or whatever the hell the noise is, I would have respected you more. And I think that the respect that I have garnered both subconsciously in you and in the hearts of our listeners by attempting to do it myself has already given me a massive leg up in this episode, so I'm going to use that to my advantage.
Because if I try to do a Chewbacca noise, it just sounds like, and I use this word with all the due respect, it just sounds like a retard caught fire, and then he went running away. You know, it's like just...
Yeah, you know what? I think that attempt you just made was, in doing that scenario, was a pretty good Chewbacca noise.
Was it? All right.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I don't do it again.
Sounds...
Don't leave it where the listeners will respect you more, both subconsciously and consciously, if you leave it in the past. But if you try to recreate it, you know, they'll break the computer. So don't do that.
I've never personally been in love with it, but all right. If it sounded all right, it sounded all right.
That's all we can have in this world, my friend, is things just sounding okay at best. So, Dylan, it is another week in the month of Halloween, which is accurate. I didn't mean to say that, but that's accurate. Yeah, in the month of October. So we're talking about Halloween stuff. We were talking about another horror movie, film in the horror genre, we'll say. So this is another one that you selected. The first two this month on DF West. What we're doing is we're doing a horror thing every month. You know, we talked about a mini series and a movie last week, so I say horror thing in general. So this week, Dylan picked it, and then last week that happened, I meant to say. This week, Dylan picked another thing. So Dylan, tell them what you picked.
By the way, before I tell them what we picked this week, more really interesting news concerning the success of it. Of course, earlier this year, it became the most watched trailer ever.
Week 2 of It Watch.
And this week, the Star Wars Last Jedi trailer dropped, and you would expect it to overtake it as the new most watched trailer. No,
I didn't expect that.
It didn't tank it. I'm surprised.
A lot of people didn't watch it. I didn't initially because I had heard Rian Johnson say, don't watch it, it's a little too spoilery. And then I caved, and then I was like, oh yeah, I really wish I didn't watch this, although I'm still incredibly pumped for this thing.
You know, I made errors about not watching it. I was like, I'm not going to watch it. I don't want the spoilers. The second it dropped.
Yeah.
There was no debate. It dropped. Somebody messaged me and was like, did you see the trailer? I was like, I don't know if I want to see it. And they were like, you want to see it? And I was like, yeah, I want to see it. And then they gave me a link.
I have mostly, I don't have time to sit down and watch trailers anymore. It's just like, it's not fun for me anymore. I like, it's always just like, oh, I should watch this because people are going to talk about it and I'm going to see them reference things that I'm not going to understand, and then I'm going to understand them less when I go into the movie, and I would rather just see it for myself. So anyway, that's usually why I cave, and I'm like sitting in the bathroom at work and I've got nothing to do. So then I'll watch them. Like I watched the New Mutants trailer today under those circumstances. Which actually looks pretty okay.
Heard good things about that trailer. I haven't actually watched it myself.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I wonder if we're going
to
enter a world now where Star Wars fans will stop complaining about Ewoks because the Porgs will have overtaken them as the annoying cute thing.
I mean, already they seem to have captured people's imaginations in that way. I didn't even really think about them now. It wasn't this thing that I noticed when I watched the trailer. I actually kind of, I at the very least, I liked that one shot where this has turned into a Star Wars The Last Jedi trailer discussion, which is not what we intended, and we will very quickly change directions. But what I will say is, I really liked the shot where Chewie roars and then the Porg like makes that noise. I really liked the move there, and I don't know, I thought that was kind of fun. But I don't know. I'm hoping that they're not going to be like a big deal in the movie. I imagine they won't be. I think Rian Johnson is smart, and if anything, they'll be like a lesser Ewok because they'll be less impactful to the film than the Ewoks were. They'll probably just be like, Luke will probably just be like, oh, look at those dumb fucks over there on this rocky planet that I have to deal with. I think that's genuine. It'll be something along those lines. And Rey will probably grow attached to one and bring it with them when they go off to wreak more havoc in the galaxy, which is what all the fucking Jedi and Skywalkers seem to be capable of.
So what you're saying is you don't like the odds of the Porgs overthrowing the First Order and eating the soldiers. You don't think that's going to happen?
I would prefer that, honestly, over what happened in Return of the Jedi, because if the Porgs did it, it would be 10 times more of like a... Like, that would be 10 times more satisfying, because then it would give them more of a reason to exist. When the Ewoks did it, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, well, okay, because they were going to eat Han Solo and Luke Skywalker anyway, so this is naturally what they should have done. Like I said, this is not a Star Wars The Last Jedi discussion. We need to stop avoiding this. We need to talk about the movie that you picked, and you need to tell people what it is.
Yeah. So again, revolving around the 1980s, everything we picked revolves around the 1980s. This is from '85. It's a little film that a lot of you may know. Some of you, maybe not. Maybe you know of it from the reputation and haven't actually seen it. We're going to be talking about 1985's Fright Night with Roddy McDowall, among others.
Yeah, that was a big surprise. I probably did know that before, and I had forgotten. And then I saw that in the credits, and I was like, oh, okay. But I didn't know who he was actually playing. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, all right.
Roddy McDowall is one of those actors that you really respect because of what he did in Planet of the Apes, but sometimes he shows up in some shitty movies. Like he was.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Like he was the Doctor in Laser Blast. You remember Laser?
That's right. Yeah, well, of course. Yeah, I mean, Mystery Science Theater did that awesome dub. Riff, not a dub. Although I would love it if they started doing that.
They just dub over those weird...
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, they should do both. I mean, they should do their usual riffing thing, and then they should do, like, They should do specials where it's like, now we're going to do our own dub. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like MST3K does Brock's dubs. That'd be great.
That would be awesome, yeah. So, yeah, 1985's Fright Night. This was an odd pick. You surprised me with this. I was like, oh, right. That movie exists.
Did I tell you the story of how this happened? So,
yeah, definitely.
So sometime last month, either towards the middle or towards the end, it's usually the time of year that I start getting into the Halloween mood and start watching a bunch of horror movies. And I was just trolling through Hulu trying to see what they had. And I watched 2 movies back to back. One that I expected to be great because of nostalgia, and one that I had heard of but had never seen myself. The one that I expected it to be great due to nostalgia was The Monster Squad, and it did not hold up.
Really?
Fright Night, on the other hand, surprised me.
Okay. I have not gone back to The Monster Squad in quite a while. I had fears that it might not hold up. We should probably talk about that. We'll do that in another Halloween, because that's a beast unto itself. I intended that pun, by the way. Fuck you. But when I watched this, all I wanted to do was watch The Monster Squad. This gave me mad vibes for that. But
they kind of get a similar, not tone or mood or anything, but like aesthetically,
they feel like they are of the same theme in terms of bringing these monsters and their themes into the present day and turning them on their head in some ways, and questioning whether or not the love and fear and mystique that we hold over them is worth it. That's what they're both about. And I have to go back to The Monster Squad. It's been a long time. I loved that movie growing up. I mean, that movie was everything I could have ever wanted when I was a kid. My mom got that movie for me specifically because she knew it would be like right up my alley. the Godzilla references. Like, I mean, anything monster is in that. And the kid characters, I definitely connected with obviously more when I was younger. It's the Goonies with the classic Universal monsters, and that was perfect for me. And I always liked it better than the Goonies.
And you know, it's still it's not like a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's just it's not as good as you might remember it.
Yeah, well, like I said, we'll have to go back and talk about that one at some point. But on to Fright Night. So I have never seen this film either prior to this first viewing experience that I had for this show. But the reputation that I had always heard of it was that it was a really fun, over-the-top 80s romp that had a cult following and, you know, had insane special effects and some really good performances and everything. Some really iconic stuff that we've referenced a lot in other horror movies and has you know, kind of informed many things that I've liked going forward.
One of the most 80s soundtracks ever. I'm a sucker for a really 80s soundtrack.
And all of that was what I was really looking forward to about this. Like, I went into this with pretty, I'm not going to say like really high expectations, because again, I really didn't, like, it didn't have that much of a reputation to me, but I went in with like middling expectations. Because I've also seen the remake with David Tennant and Anton Yelchin, which I didn't hate, but the only thing I really remember about it is David Tennant's performance, which I really remember enjoying. And I remember Colin Farrell was like a really CGI-y vampire. I remember a lot of CGI that I didn't care for. So I didn't really have much expectation, but I expected an over-the-top 80s romp. And what I got was some of that. I found myself very conflicted, is the best way to put it. Because aesthetically, this thing is totally right up my alley. The makeup and special effects is spot on. It is perfect post-American Werewolf in London prosthetics, you know, post The Thing, like puppets moving around scaring the hell out of you. Like, there's some really good looking stuff in this that fucking still freaks the hell out of me, even though it's in this context of this really cheesy, like, you know, self-aware or sometimes self-aware horror context. But that was the thing. The rest of it felt really unsure and mixed and awkward to me. I got a really mixed vibe from a lot of this movie, and up front, it was all negative. I wasn't into it for about like 30 minutes. Like around when whenever Roddy McDowall is introduced as Peter Vincent, I was like, oh, okay, that's who he's playing. So I can and he's doing it like this, so it'll probably work out for me there. But the main kid and the rest of the cast did not get this script. They did not get the intent here. They didn't know if they were playing it straight, like as a real scary vampire movie, or if this was supposed to be a real satire. And I'm not sure if the script always knows either, because sometimes it's got really spot-on horror elements, and then occasionally it'll have like a kind of funny play on the vampire genre or the horror genre in general. And then the rest of the time, it's the actors stumbling their way through what could either be sort of okay satire on horror movies with these certain really stilted characters and archetypes and characters who don't make any sense and people who don't act like real people, or it's just another one of those movies and I can't tell the difference all the time. And again, I don't know sometimes if it's the script's fault or if it's the performance's fault, but I was really disappointed how many performances it was, including the main vampire. Like, the main kid and his girlfriend and his mother, like, I kind of expected all that. But the main vampire, I really expected to be one of the saving graces. And he largely was also really unsure to me of how to deliver his dialogue. Like, sometimes he was playing, like, a real modern Dracula, and then other times he was a villain from Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. I don't know why that was the example in my head, but because that's quite a bit later than when this came out, but that's what was in my head. So anyway, I'm sorry to ramble about it, but there was a lot of things I wanted to get out. So yeah, I don't know, D. I was really mixed on this one, and largely did not find myself enjoying it. But I say really mixed because there were some things I really liked about it, like the makeup and the soundtrack, like you mentioned before. Like, that main song is fucking great.
Yeah.
I got that stuck in my head. I listened to that right before we got on the call.
You
And
mean the Fright Night song that plays
Fright
during
Night,
the,
yeah, of course, yeah, the end credits song. And then, I
That's
mean,
pretty-
the vampire's theme is also killer. That's perfect 80s vampire score. And a lot of the cinematography around him is also really good.
Is that the one that just plays over long stretches of the movie when they're building like atmosphere or tension or something, and it's just a couple like repeated notes, just like dun 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 dun. Is it that one? Is that what you're talking about?
That's the one. Yeah.
Just on. Yeah.
It felt very John Carpenter, and then that's
It is
a
kind
good
of
thing.
John Carpenter, and it's very effective in that same sort of Carpenterian way, you know.
But yeah, I mean, but outside of those things, I really did not have a great time with this one, unfortunately, which was really sad because there was I had expectations to really like it. And you know what else I forgot to mention? I didn't think it was that over the top or over the top enough. I feel like it felt restrained. I in some respects, like, you know, obviously some of the performances were not restrained at all.
Even by 1985 standards, you think?
Yeah, I absolutely. I'm not even saying like, oh, for the 80s, this is them trying to hold things back. I don't even think it's like a sense of gore. I think it's a sense of, I wish they would have gone crazier with the narrative, because it feels like they were building up to that. It just feels like once we get to the monster stuff, it's just too traditional for this material. It needs to be more twisted on its head, or there needs to be more happening. There needs to be more vampires, a werewolf, some more monsters, something to make this different from any other vampire movie. Because I think that was the other thing. I've been here before. I've seen this kind of stuff twisted on its head. You know, there's been lots of stuff after this, like Buffy and Angel and all the 90s and 2000s vampire stuff that has taken the concepts here and done them a million times better.
I see. So this is what you've done. You've John Cartered yourself.
What?
It's that thing. It's that thing where like people went and saw John Carter of Mars, and they thought, "Oh, this is dumb. We've seen this done a million times before." And what none of them know is, but it did it first though. Like the book.
Not
like,
even that though.
Like the book influenced all that shit that you know, like Flash Gordon and Star Wars and all that shit. Like John Carter of Mars, you know, the movie is really late to the game, but the book is like super old and like kind of had a part in establishing all that shit. That happens a lot of times, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I feel like
older properties.
Absolutely. I mean, John Carter, it's less excusable because that's a modern update on that, so they should have made that material more fresh. Or just adapted what was already there and just made it more fresh. I haven't seen that, though, so I can't speak to that. You know, I see what you're saying with this, but at the same time, it wasn't just that. I think that on its own, for the material that it was doing at the time, I think that it could have pushed things a lot farther and twisted things more on their head and gone less traditional. I think they felt either scaled back by the studio or the director, maybe, or somebody wanted to make a traditional vampire movie and somebody wanted to make a satire. And I feel like there isn't enough of a middle ground for this to really work.
That's really fascinating because I didn't have any of that at all. Like I'm not even sure what you mean actually. But
in what sense? The sense of it trying to be a satire, or the sense of it trying to be a...
No, I get that. It definitely walks on both sides of that fence. It's sort of it's Scream a decade earlier.
Yeah, no, it is definitely it tries to be Scream, but I don't think the script or the performances are with that concept enough for it to really get there. You know what I'm saying? I feel like the actors feel like, oh, we're just making another horror movie here. And they don't, and they're not playing the material enough to be twisted on its head, you know? And then sometimes the script also doesn't feel like it's totally sure about, okay, we're not just making another vampire movie. We're thinking a little bit more about how we can play this in the modern era. The audience knows this kind of stuff, so we have to kind of be aware of that. And sometimes, again, I feel like they were like, all right, well, let's forget about that for a while and give ourselves a break and just make another straight-up vampire movie for 20 minutes. And those are the stretches where I just kind of tuned out.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I was really mixed on this one. But I don't know what really stood out to you about it, so that way I can kind of I can discuss some more details.
Well, I really like the idea of a horror movie. And again, this is something that has been done again since this, but I don't know if it had been done before. A horror movie where the main character is an avid horror movie fan, and that being the impetus for him believing that this supernatural shit is going on and nobody else believing him because he's the one that's like super into these vampire movies and shit. I really like that idea. The only problem with it is,
Yeah.
I wish that main kid was I don't even think it's his performance. I think it's if there is one fault of the script that I can see, it's that he's supposed to be this horror geek, but like it doesn't really come across unless he's watching the TV, you know, like he doesn't seem to, like, he goes to the other kid who doesn't even believe in the vampires for like advice on how to fight vampires. And I'm
yeah,
like,
that was ridiculous. That stood out to me a lot too.
You're watching Peter Vincent movies every night. And you don't know like the basics
Yeah.
of fighting a vampire. Like, so I like the idea behind that. I just don't know if they executed that. So that is one thing where I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, that was a huge problem for me. Because you know what else was the problem there? That's supposed to be his whole thing, is that when he... And there was another interesting side of it, too. When he was younger, he was very into these horror movies, you know? So, and he's kind of grown out of that now. He's got a girlfriend. He's, you know, more mature, quote-unquote. In many respects, he's not, though. And now he's being forced to go back to that younger point and get back into those horror movies, though. That idea was not nearly explored enough, though. So when you get to the part where it's like, I gotta go to Eddie to desperately and like I'm gonna drop dead tomorrow, ask him how to solve my vampire problem. And I'm just like, dude, you should just... Like, you were watching one of these movies the other night. Like, you should be able to pull this knowledge out of your head and protect yourself, you know? And more than that, if he is so stalwart in his belief of it because he's spent so much of his life inundated in it, he should be more self-confident to deal with it on his own, you know? Like, that's usually how these things go, is they're just like, all right, I'm going to deal with it on my own. And he gets there eventually, but it takes a while.
I don't know about that necessarily. It's one thing to be into monster movies. It's another thing entirely when a monster moves in next door. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, we're all into kaiju movies, and we can talk all day. We can talk all day about it. Like, if there was a kaiju attack tomorrow, I'd do this. But then when the thing actually happened, we'd probably, shit our pants. And
he does some stuff though that you would think would prompt him to do more. He goes to the police and goes into the house with the guy. And he goes into the bushes and sits there.
No, I don't know why he thought they would believe him.
Yeah, why did he? And he goes to his mother right after it happens. He does some really stupid stuff over and over and over again that totally warrants people thinking he's crazy. And that's another huge problem with the script and his performance. And I don't know which one to blame some of the time. He doesn't seem to understand why people think he's crazy. You know? He thinks that it should be totally obvious to everybody that what he's saying is true. Now, maybe he's so far gone into his little world of horror that that's the point. But he seems to have gotten out of them because he's got his little girlfriend. So again, I don't know what to take away from this guy.
I don't know if he's really gotten out of them, though. Because, at the very beginning of the movie,
he's making out with her and not looking at the TV. She is. So I think that's the sense that I got there, is that he's kind of... It's like, yeah, I that stuff is still there, but this is where my real focus is.
Mm-hmm, yeah, that's again, I really like the concept of having the horror movie where the main character is this horror addict and all that, and that is one of the areas in which I can agree with you that the script falls flat on execution. However, the flip side of that I really love is the Roddy McDowall character, the idea of this. Yeah,
he's really the thing that got me through this, without a doubt. He's great.
this Peter Cushing / Elvira.
And the script is spot on with him and knows exactly what to do with him. And that was where that's what got me through this. And those were the ideas that I really latched onto.
Yeah, he's really fantastic in this movie.
Although another thing about the main kid, Charlie. So he's this big horror fan, but he's also getting a little more mature and hanging out with his girlfriend and being an asshole to her and totally, whipping her back and forth like a rubber band. That was another thing. There was nothing I liked about him. He was an asshole to her, and then he was just doing nonsensical bullshit to try and get people to believe him about the vampire, even though he should already, as a rational human being, be like, nobody's gonna believe me. So I should do something more intelligent with my time and not get people to restrain me because I'm acting crazy, and stop being an asshole to my girlfriend. What was I building to though? Okay. So, fuck, I lost exactly what I was saying. Oh, okay, no, I got it. So he's watching the Peter Vincent marathons, and, I don't know why he thinks Peter Vincent is an actual vampire killer. Because if he's a TV host and he's actually starring in movies, shouldn't he know that he's an actor? I know it's only 1985, and, there's no internet to look up IMDb or whatever, but surely on the TV guide, there's like little blurbs about him or something. I don't know. Surely there's some source of information about who this guy actually is. And again, if he's actually into horror movies that much, you'd think he would be looking into his heroes that are actually starring in the horror films,
That's one plot point that might have made more sense if this was like, if the main character of this movie had been like a smaller child as opposed to a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah, because he feels weirdly naive at some points when at the beginning of the film, I'm supposed to be seeing him as growing out of all this stuff,
Unless the very fact that a vampire moves in next door to him kind of starts to blur the line between what's real and false, and that's why he thinks, oh, maybe this Peter Vincent guy actually does know how to fight the fucking...
There's all these ideas about the influence, the hypnotic influence of, is the vampire's name Jerry? His name's Jerry, right?
Yeah,
Jerry Dandridge. Awful vampire name. Although, if it had been revealed to be a fake name, I would have been cool with it because it's a really like 80s like guy living next door name. So maybe it is a fake name, and that would make perfect sense. But I wish that we would have found out like, oh, he has like this awesome 18th century name or whatever.
See, I don't need every vampire to be fucking named Count. Whatever, Count Chocula.
But that he was using an assumed identity, and he could have had some other cooler sounding name. It doesn't have to be Count Dracula, but
like you assume he's been around for fucking 500 years. Maybe he got bit in the 50s. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, but he has this old painting of his girlfriend that Amy supposedly looks like and doesn't really at all.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So we know that he's from a period before photography. So I'm not saying the 18th century is, obviously a while back. So maybe it's not that far. But it's obviously like pre the 1860s when we had photography. It
might be an identity in order for him to blend in with
yeah, I totally believe that it probably is. I would have liked to have actually found out what his cool vampire name was, so that way it wasn't just Jerry Dandridge is coming to get us, because that was like the satire part that I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be laughing at, like the fact that he's got this 80s cushy sounding guy next door name, I
don't even know if that's supposed to be satire. I think
that's what I'm saying. I don't know.
No, I really don't think it is. I think it's just supposed to be, he just has a normal sounding name,
It didn't work for me then. I wish it came off as like bizarre.
Yeah, maybe it's just because I'm used to like fucking the BBC version of being human, where like the main vampire just walks into a room and says, "Hey, my name is Mitchell." It's not like.
But that makes sense because he's an actual guy living in the real world, in like a version of the real world, and that story is like trying to portray them as people just trying to live a daily life. So yeah, it totally makes sense for them to have like a normal name there. But this guy's supposed to be like the 80s. Over the top equivalent of Dracula, So he's got like this veneer of being in our modern society, and he's lying to everybody, and that's what Charlie is really trying to. That's why he's so vigilant to everybody, is trying to get them to see through his bullshit. which is usually what these vampire stories are about. But like I said, just the name didn't work with the trying to strike fear. And again, I wish that they would have revealed that he would have had a fake name to go along. That would have been a fake name to go along with that idea. I just think that would have worked better.
The only thing I would like to explain about him is I would have liked to know what the deal was with Billy, his like manservant.
I thought he was going to be a werewolf. That's what I expected. There was a little moment where I thought they were setting that up, and then he turned out to not be human, but I don't know what he was supposed to be.
I think he's just supposed to be some kind of a Renfield Straker from Salem's Lot type character.
I guess, yeah.
But he's clearly not human, so I don't know what he is supposed to be, and that's the only thing as far as the actual vampire stuff in this that I would have liked to explain. You know, what the fuck is he? What's his deal? It is kind of vaguely implied that him and Jerry have got a little something going on, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it does feel a little like, it's the 80s, so we have to kind of play around with this vague, sort of cleanly, stereotypical, cosmopolitan homosexuality, which I thought was sort of interesting, and again, if this was a smarter satire, it might have worked better, but as it stands, I just don't know really what to take away from it. But no, I thought that when Vincent shot him, he would come up as a werewolf, and I thought that would have been cooler than him just getting up and running at him, and then he just melts into goo. Why did he melt into goo? Because he got shot too many times? What exactly happened there?
Again, that's a good question. That's the only thing that I walked out of the movie scratching my head about. I
can't remember.
What was his deal? But anyway, so yeah, going back to the things about this that I like. Like I said, Roddy McDowall.
Yeah, he's the really, really killer thing here.
Everything about that character works. It's great It's great conceptually. He's got a good arc going on. He sells the performance like nobody's business.
Oh.
Especially like the scene in his apartment when he finally comes face to face with the reality of.
That is an awesome scene. Yeah, he plays that really well.
Yeah, which brings me to the other character in this that I really like. I really like Evil Ed. I've seen clips of what Evil Ed became in the remake, and it saddened me because in this, I like this just really weird, freaky guy who's obviously sort of an outcast in society, and then he winds up becoming a vampire and relishing in it. I really liked everything to do with him. He's got a really great, weird voice. That's very entertaining, especially when he turns evil and starts spouting one-liners about his dinner's in the oven. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why is that a line that you would say? But he makes it work somehow. It's fascinating. I really liked him. And also, I think some of the horror elements in it just really work. Like this, like the straight up horror elements. For instance, the scene early on in the movie where Jerry knows that Charlie knows that he's a vampire, and he comes into his house to kill him. That whole scene. He locks the mother in the room, and then he comes to kill him in his room, and then he stabs a pencil through his hand, and then something happened. The mother wakes up. I don't know
why that freaked him out. Like why that was so damaging. Like I
think
because it's made of wood. Was that it?
Yeah, I think the idea is supposed to be that the pencil was acting as like a miniature stake.
But it's not through the heart, though. Like, is it wood at any part of the body is like, oh god, wood is like kryptonite to them? I didn't know that. Most versions like, oh, wood. It's kind of obligatory if it's wood or not. Anything through the heart's enough. Although sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it is very specifically wood, but it's always got to be through the heart. I just thought it was weird.
That's the thing about vampire lore. It's kind of all over the place. It just depends on what movie you're watching. My assumption was, yeah, if you want to kill him, you got to drive it through the heart. But I mean, it would fucking hurt no matter where.
See, that was another thing, because like then when Peter Vincent says to Charlie, "Oh, the rules have been exactly like in the movie so far, so why not in every other respect?" And I'm like, which movie though? Like that because these guys are all supposed to be hosting horror movie marathons and knowing all this stuff. So it's like I'm not expecting them to reference like a specific franchise, but I think that we need to be a little smarter about how we're approaching our own vampire lore. Although largely it was pretty by the numbers. So
I assumed he was talking about the lore of his vampire movies. Oh, it's been like
that was odd though. wasn't it? Because he was in Peter Cushing's Dracula movies in a universe where those also exist, because they're played back to back.
Mm-hmm.
That we see that in the movie. I thought that was a very strange... Now, I'm not saying that's like a huge problem. I've seen that in a million different things that I love, like where it's a fictional universe and we try to do a story with a fictional celebrity, so we can't do like a real celebrity, so they kind of have to exist at the same time as the real celebrity in this world for it to still be somewhat realistic. Anyway, it's like they've done that with like Adam West and stuff in some stories. But I thought it was weird to play them back to back with the Peter Cushing movies. I feel like what they should have done is just had the Peter Vincent movies, as opposed to showing clips from whatever Christopher Lee Dracula that they got 2 seconds from.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's a good scene from whichever one that was. I can't remember which specific one. I remember that scene.
Yeah.
I like that scene.
I don't remember the exact clip right now, so I couldn't tell you. If I knew what clip it was, I could probably tell you. I didn't get for the audience at home, I didn't get to rewatch this movie before this review like I wanted to, so I'm a little foggy on the specific details. But
which I feel bad. I don't mean to just attack this thing that you like, which is why I was like, God damn it, I wish you would have rewatched it so we could kind of attack it on more of an equal front. But you rewatched it fairly recently, so it's not a huge deal. And I don't mean to just hate this thing obligatorily, because again, I went into it wanting to really enjoy it, and again, I liked a lot of things about it. I'm definitely very conflicted about it. Like, I also think a lot of the horror cinematography in particular works. Like a lot of the stuff where he's stalking them through the streets at the end, I thought that worked pretty well.
The other one that I think really works is the scene where Peter stakes Evil Ed. That's some of the that great makeup and stuff we were talking about.
That's the scene I was discussing. Yeah, that's a killer bit.
The slow transformation from wolf back into humanoid, and they make it super painful. I don't think enough vampire movies bring across just how painful getting a stake through the heart is supposed to be, whether you're a vampire or a human. But it's agonizing, you know. You feel bad for the kid.
Yeah, well, that was the whole idea of that scene, is that the reality of it was slowly dawning on Vincent that he had just murdered a child. You know, he didn't. I mean, realistically, the child was already dead, obviously, but that's not what he was seeing. He saw the child die before his very eyes and revert back to that innocent, young, small form from the horrible monster. And there was a lot in Roddy McDowall's eyes there. Like I said, Roddy McDowall was sort of a surprise for me in this movie. I didn't know he was playing that role, and goddamn, he was good. Like I said, I probably would have been a lot more negative on it had he not shown up however long it is until we get to him, and suddenly given us this character that I was really able to sink my teeth into. And also, he dresses just like the Third Doctor, which I'm going through all of the Third Doctor stuff right now, and that just worked perfectly for me, so that was cool. And realistically, it's more of like a Peter Cushing Van Helsing get-up, which the Third Doctor's get-up is somewhat based on. So that's more of what it's referencing, but I still enjoyed it on that level. I like that kind of, that cloak with a suit look.
He is a bit Doctor-esque, isn't he?
His performance is more Doctor-esque than it is Van Helsing. His character is very morally ambiguous, which is fucking awesome. Because he's paid to show up, and I liked all of that. I liked the idea of, bringing, like, oh, we're gonna try and convince this kid that he's not a vampire, as opposed to, just trying to convince him that he's crazy and all that. Like, we're humoring him. Like, that's what he thought he was doing. He thought he was doing a nice little act of charity and being paid for it.
Yes, I
didn't like the idea of that scene though.
And I liked the meta commentary of his TV shows being canceled because this is the mid '80s. Kids don't care about vampire movies anymore. They want their Jasons and their Freddys.
Yep. I really liked that scene. Yeah, where there's the direct call out of the slasher bits.
He feels like the sort of central theme of the movie. It's all about being like, in this era of Jason and Freddy, we can still do vampires in a way that's effective. You know what I mean? Like. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's probably that was probably the idea going into it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And see, to me, because you were talking about it isn't successful enough at being a satire, and I think that's probably why you had a more negative reaction to it than I did, because I never really saw it as trying to be a satire. Despite I just felt to me it was more like a Wes Craven New Nightmare sort of deal, where it plays itself pretty straight, but it's got like these meta elements to it. You know what I mean?
Do you think that works better there, though? Because the meta...
In an
but
era
I think the
where-
meta elements there are a lot more obligatory because, Wes Craven's in the movie and it's about the lead actress. I feel like that's a lot more straight up than this is.
New Nightmare and then subsequently Scream are way more meta than this is. But this is sort of an early attempt at that, and it's probably just because this is an earlier time. Meta wasn't really in yet, I feel like this is like...
I don't even think it had to be all that meta as much as it just had to set itself apart more and be clearer about its own identity in order to be successful at... even if it wasn't a complete farce, it just had to be smarter about the elements of the vampire and horror genre that it was twisting on its head, especially just in terms of the protagonist, like just and the fact that we spend all the time with him, not all of it, but a lot of it. And like I said, by the time we got to Roddy McDowell, I was just so drained by Charlie that it was almost like I almost felt like Roddy McDowell in this universe, drained, sick of everybody's shit, really disillusioned with where the world has gone, not satisfied with the status quo of horror, and then forced into action in order to deal with this horrible evil. I really liked all that, and being super morally ambiguous and selfish about it. I thought that was all not only really interesting, but I sort of felt that way because I really didn't like the main cast of characters. But yeah, I think that the satire on his side is really smart. Especially in the bit where he goes to Jerry's house and just like puts on his little show for Charlie and everything. Just like the really patronizing way he speaks to everybody is really really cool. And there's that really great through line in a sequence of scenes where Amy is talking to Dandridge on the phone about doing this whole thing, and he's giving the conditions under which he will meet up with them and convince Charlie that he's not a vampire, which I feel like they're also idiots because they really should have again, they don't believe that it's true, but I think that they should have thought that he was suspicious at the very least because of how specific he was being. Like him being like, oh, don't bring crosses because I've been reborn and I have like these new age Christian mentality. I was like, you guys should probably be suspicious about that at the very least. Even if he's not a vampire, that's weird. That he would be against that. And then the holy water. So the whole test is he's going to make him drink holy water. But the condition under which Dandridge will do the test is that it's not actual holy water, that it's just and like Roddy McDowell has to assure him that it's just tap water. And I'm just like...
Right. Well, it doesn't have to be an effective test because they've already made up their minds.
Right. I know. But I'm just like... I liked the moral ambiguity of Roddy McDowell's character, but at the same time, I felt like, okay, we're just drawing out the inevitable. I did really like the conditions under which he did find out that he was actually a vampire, though. Although I don't know why he pulled out that mirror. Like, what was he actually pulling it out to use it for? Because, like you said, he's already made up his mind. That's why he used the tap water. Although, did Roddy McDowell tell Charlie when he was in the car and he had actually finally realized that there were vampires because he didn't see Dandridge's reflection in the mirror that he nonsensically pulled out? Maybe he was going to take a smoke. I don't know if we'd seen him smoke before that, though. I don't know. I questioned that, though. What I was going to ask, though, did he tell Charlie that the reason he knew it was because it was tap water? Or part of the reason that he was sure was because he didn't give him actual holy water. Did he tell him that?
I don't remember.
I feel like he should have told him that. He should have been straight up about that because that's another huge crucial component. But yeah, I don't know, man. I liked Roddy McDowell, and I liked elements of Dandridge's performance as well. I don't know if we talked enough about him. I liked his eyes.
Yeah.
You know, that's very important when you're doing like a spin on a Dracula type. Is you need hypnotic eyes and all that, and that all worked fine.
Yeah, Chris Sarandon. What I liked about him, which fun fact, if you haven't seen Fright Night, you might recognize Chris Sarandon as the detective from the first Child's Play movie, which was also directed by Tom Holland, who directed this film.
No relation to Spider-Man.
Pretty sure it was only two years later. Anyway, I like that he brings, you know, because it's the 80s, he's like the super sexualized vampire, you know. He's got a little bit of Frank Langella thing going on. But behind that, like behind his eyes, there's this fucking monster that wants to rip your throat out. And I think he can whip that out, you know, pretty effectively. I like when he's, you know, talking up Charlie's mom and being very, you know, charming and whatnot, and then as soon as she's not around, he's fucking like threatening the kid. Like he turns on a dime.
He was a little overt about it in front of her. That's what I didn't love. Is that he's just a little too. He's a little too. What's the word? He's a little too arrogant about what he says in dialogue. Like some of it was kind of clever, where he was like, "I'll come over, you know, whenever I please," which was a little weird. Like, you don't say that in a social situation. I guess the idea is that he's hypnotizing his mother, and she's not gonna think twice about whatever he says because she's making googly eyes at him. But that was that was like super like, I'm threatening you in front of your mother. Deal with it.
She's very clearly, you know, a single mom who needs a little dick. So she's not at all concerned about him or when he wants to come over, you know. In fact, she probably wanted him to come over as quickly as possible.
Right. But I still thought that he was laying it on a little thick after that. Because he goes, I can't remember the exact wording, but he says something following that line that's 10 times more overtly threatening to Charlie, and not just, I'm just going to drop by. Part of it was the way he delivered with your mother's permission, of course. Because he had this little look at Charlie before that, and I'm like, that's super, like, it's almost outside of him being a vampire. What Charlie's mother should have been thinking, he's not trying to fuck me, he's trying to fuck my son. That's what the thought process there should have been. But then there was another series of lines after that I just thought he was laying it on a little thick, that he was not all up to code. I liked his assistant more, actually, performance-wise, just because I thought he was scarier. Because he didn't have the monster mode to go into. Like, I really only found Dandridge frightening when he was in monster mode. Like, I didn't find him uncomfortably unsettling when he was just being quiet. I didn't so much have, he's got the predatory, hungry eyes that, like, makes him want to lunge out like the Christopher Lee Dracula. I didn't get that as much. I got it when, you know, the script and he was being obvious about it, but
I think Dandridge's best scene in terms of being frightening is that scene that I was talking about on that first night when he comes into Charlie's room. That's pretty
it was
effective.
Okay. I like the bit at the end where he's stalking them through the alleys. That's where I really that's where he was the most scary and intimidating to me. And even the bit where he was seducing Amy, that was unsettling in a good way. You know, like all the relationship stuff between Charlie and Amy is awful. Like, I hated that.
It made me realize something I had never thought of before, but the 80s is the perfect time to set a vampire story because there's always been that element of, like, sexual metaphor with the vampire, and this is in the age of the don't have sex or you'll die movie, you know? It's...
Yeah, well, I feel like maybe they should have gone more overt with the homosexuality stuff then, no? Maybe part of the... Wouldn't it have... If he's killing all these girls, wouldn't it have been more of a better cover if he was in his day life pretending to be homosexual with the guy, even if that wasn't what he was doing? If he's drawing in all these victims at night, you know? So that way he wouldn't have...
Even if there is something going on between him and his manservant, I don't even know if he would be straight up gay. I think it would be more of a bisexual situation.
No, I'm not saying
'Cause
he would be straight up gay. I'm saying he should be putting on that air for the public so that way they don't think that he's out with all these girls and bringing them in to kill them. You know, it's part of his cover.
But if he puts out the image in the public that he's gay, then that's going to make it a little bit more harder for him to lure in the girls that he wants to feed on.
I mean,
You know what I mean?
but he's super attractive. He could come up with any number of excuses to them in private of reasons why he's suddenly interested in them. And also, he's so hypnotic, I don't even think they would question it. I think it's more the public and the police officers that he's got to worry about, you know? Where you can have, like, because, you know, when the police officer comes in with Charlie, which I thought was a hilarious bit, because at first the cop seems to be, like, up to snuff and ready to actually follow through with his investigations. Because he takes the kid there, clearly he believed him enough to actually take him to the house. So the fact that he doesn't even go check the garbage, I was like, come on, man, at least do that, even though obviously he wouldn't have found anything.
Well,
I got why he didn't go to the basement, because at that point, the kid was obviously raving. But he should have at least checked the garbage, you know? Well, like if he believed Charlie enough to go there, if he put that much stock in him already.
No, because here's the thing. He believed Charlie enough to go there under the impetus that the kid was saying, I think this is the guy that's been killing all the women. As soon as Charlie said vampire.
Yeah, I know, but that's why he didn't go into the basement. But before that, he was at least going to check the garbage.
Right.
So he should have at least carried that out. He just walks out, like, furious at that point. And I'm like, okay, fine. I get why you feel that way, but at least be a proper cop, you know, and do what you came there to do, you know?
I feel like a person would, though. Like, as soon as that kid says vampire, all credibility goes out the window. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, but I felt like there was... I feel like that's just another thing where I feel like the satire was...
I think you're overestimating the work ethic of the common detective.
You're absolutely right. But I also feel like the way it plays, it just comes off as weird to me. Just the exchange of the dialogue and the way it's acted, I just feel like people are jumping to conclusions all over the place, and suddenly I'm just like, oh, all right. So now we're back here again. And I feel like the satire just didn't come out in that respects enough as well, in terms of how we were characterizing everybody else in Charlie's life, you know? Like, I just think we should have seen when Charlie... Wouldn't you have liked to have seen Charlie at the police station? Or just something more to set that up? Because I just thought it was super odd that he... Like, it almost felt like he knew the cop or something that just got him there personally with him, and that they would both go into the house at the same time. Because, I don't know, you would also think that, like, he would go in without Charlie. Like, oh, we got an anonymous tip about this, and I want to look into it. So, I had several questions there. And I feel like if we were playing this up more as a satire, or these elements in particular as more satirical in terms of how we're characterizing the other people who are encountering this situation, I would have believed it more that he would have just fucking stormed out and just suddenly thrown out everything and not even questioned it a little bit, you know? So just elements like that I really questioned, and scenes like that I really just didn't enjoy sitting through. Because I'm also just not a huge fan of the movie where it's like, oh, we're gonna make you think the main character's... the public thinks the main character is crazy for an hour. And... Because that's not very fun. And it can get very obnoxious if the other characters don't come off as believable or likable on their own. And I think that's just another huge thing here, is that I just didn't like anybody else in the cast, so that way I could really see everybody on an equal playing field of like, all right, well, you know, not only do I believe that they wouldn't believe him, but yeah, they shouldn't be believing him, you know, and I still like them on their own level. I just wanted everybody to fucking get over themselves and just get on with the monster action, you know?
No, but they can't. This is 1985.
No, I know. And I just think that I feel that's where I wish the satire was smarter and the performances were more on level with what the script was trying to do. So that way I wouldn't have been sitting there smacking my head watching those scenes, just super just uncomfortable with the line delivery and just some of the way things were coming off. But we were talking about something in particular before we got to the bit where Charlie goes to the house with the cop. Like I said, I preferred the performance of the assistant in that scene in particular, because I thought that the subtle way he was kind of threatening Charlie, particularly with his eyes, was scarier than anything Dandridge did. Because that guy's not a vampire. He's just got his kind of physicality and his sheer presence. He came off as very, like... Igor is not the right comparison. I'm trying to think of any number of, like, butlers of terrible dudes, terrible influential dudes in fiction, where... they're just super intimidating, almost more so than the intimidating guy who they work for. Like, sort of like some versions of Alfred in Batman, but like an evil version, you know? So I don't know, I liked him in that respect. His line delivery was not always there. But that was a consistent problem throughout, so it might not have been his fault as much as whatever else was going on. So
I wonder if he could have been a golem. I'm just trying to figure out
that would have been a cooler monster to whip out. Don't you wish there would have been more monsters in this? Like, I guess we sort of get the werewolf with the bit with Eddie.
Were you expecting more monsters?
Yeah, I expected a proper werewolf, not just the bit with Eddie. Like, I was expecting another proper werewolf after that. I don't know. I wasn't like totally let down in that specific respect, but I wish they would have gone there because of how good the makeup was, and because we're playing with the horror tropes. I feel like we should be a little more far-reaching, you know?
I don't know. I didn't go into this universally regarded vampire movie expecting there to be a werewolf, so that's. But
I thought that he had I thought the servant would turn out to be a werewolf. I mean, that's a huge part of a lot of vampire lore. Is like, oh, vampires use werewolves as servants. So I thought that would be the reveal there, or something along those lines. Or he would have a werewolf in the basement or something.
It is, but then the other, I would say, more common thing that you see with vampires is the human, or whatever this guy's supposed to be, assistant. You know, your Renfields, your Strakers, and often, as is the case with Straker, not so much with Renfield, he just went crazy, but often they will be gifted.
He was also under the influence of Dracula, so.
Yeah, they will often, apart from aiding the vampire, in some stories, they will also be gifted with some supernatural power of their own in terms of enhanced strength and things.
Yeah, I guess that's what's going on there. I guess he's probably just some element of the living dead because he just decays. I just don't know why he decayed right then and there, you know? That's what I would have liked to have known.
I would have liked whatever was supernatural with him explained a little bit better, but as far as what role, I mean, he's your Renfield, your Straker, just the vampiric attendant, assistant, whatever you want to call them.
Why was that gun loaded? That was another thing I wondered about. It's a prop. Did he load it, like, did he actually load it, you know, like himself? Like was it a real gun that was used as a prop, and then he loaded it himself, you know, afterwards? Because it came off that but like the way it played in the scene, it played like it came loaded. Like he's like, this is like when he pulls the gun, he's like, this is a prop from Orgy of the Dead or whatever the hell the movie was, and then he starts firing it, and I'm like, did it come loaded like that, or did you like? There should have been there should have been a bit before where he was loading it, because I was like, wow, I hope were these the guys that made The Crow, like.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was about to say. I assume he just loaded it himself. Because, I mean, they used real guns just with blanks in the movie industry. Just ask the Lee family.
Well, that's why I said, that's how I made the Crow joke. But, like, I wondered about that. Because, you know, they don't always use real guns. Or they're not even ones that can be loaded, you know? Like, so I wondered about that. Just because it came out as a huge point in that bit. Because, you know, that seemed to be what killed the attendant. So I wondered about that. But yeah, so just talking more about the monster stuff then. I really liked the vampire monster mode. I liked that design. I've seen it after this. And this is, I guess this is the place where that more demonic face with the teeth starts. You know, because that was the aesthetic that Buffy and Angel took with them, where they can change their face up and go into monster mode. So I like that.
I liked that it was more than just the two fangs. I think it kind of went a little bit further back to like Nosferatu, where he's got like the two fangs in the front and then like the fangs on the side.
It's like a cross between that and a more traditional vampire design, and more of like a bat. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. I think that they're very monstrous in this film.
One thing that I also... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
One thing I do like about this movie is I think the vampire stuff, be it effects or I'm a fan of vampire movies. You're a little bit more of a werewolf guy, but this movie handles its vampires well, and I appreciate that, and brings them into...
I'm not like against vampires. I have a certain preference for werewolves, certainly. But I like it. I like it when it's done well. And I mean, design wise and aesthetically, I loved all that. Like, that's why I'm so conflicted about the rest of it, because I liked all of that stuff quite a bit, and I just wish that I was more on board with the rest of the story and the way it was executing its concepts. But the actual vampire, like all the monster stuff at the end, is cool looking at the very least.
Especially when Ed gets turned into a vampire, and he looks super freaky because,
I mean, especially when he gets the cross burned into him. Holy fuck, it's like a two-faced vampire.
First of all, he's this skinny ass little teenage boy with this fucking gaping maw of just like dagger teeth sticking out in every direction, and like these animal eyes. And if that's not freaky enough, then Peter Vincent burns the cross into his forehead.
Yeah, that was the real killer move. That was awesome.
That was some great makeup stuff. And I also thought he looked... I know we already talked about this scene, but you almost kind of got a werewolf, because he does turn into a wolf.
Like I said, I thought that was really cool, and I thought we were going to get another proper werewolf after that, but that was kind of that was quite a good medium. We got the effect, certainly. One other thing about him. Evil Eddie. I really liked that kid performance-wise. Like, I feel like he's a ball of energy. He's so happy to be there. He was one of those guys where I'm like, oh my god, he gets this script. He totally gets this script. He was another one of my saving graces most of the time. His lines, he's too inexperienced though. His line delivery isn't there to match his enthusiasm. He's too enthusiastic.
This whole movie I was watching, I was like, man, it's a shame where this guy's career ended up, because he should have grown up and played the Joker at some point. That fucking laugh, man.
Yeah, he has if he has the experience of this afterwards, I imagine he could have gone on to do really great villain performances and character acting roles. Just anything. He's just super charismatic and energetic, and he has a very particular personality. But just the inexperience in his age definitely showed, and I really think that was it. Like that was the only issue there. And again, I think that I feel like the script should have used him more. Like, I feel like he was underdeveloped. Why did they call him evil exactly? Just because he was into horror movies?
No, I think it comes out of his fucking freaky ass laugh. I think that was
okay. But I didn't
get the sense, because I didn't get the sense that he was as into horror movies as the main kid was supposed to be.
Which is bizarre, right?
They really should have just made that his thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, otherwise, why would Charlie go to him and be like, "How do I protect myself?" I mean, fucking, he must be at least somewhat into them, because he has a skull. I gotta stop talking so loud. There's people sleeping downstairs. There's a skull on top of his shelf with vampire teeth in it, and that's where he pulls the cross that he gives to Eddie from. So clearly he's into them on some level, that he's prepared for vampire attack, even though he thinks that Charlie's fucking nuts.
Yeah, I think he knew that he was supposed to be playing like a nerd, a kind of nerdy character, but he went in like a Crispin Glover type direction. I think
he defined the nerd of the late 80s and 90s and going forward he's not like a wimpy like goody two shoes. He's kind of on the edge, like, he's lighting fires and shit kind of kid, but he's also in all kinds of nerdy shit. He's an outcast in many respects, not just in that he likes geek stuff. I really liked that idea. I just think he was underdeveloped in the fact that he was bullied and everything. Like when that comes up later, like that's a great scene where like Jerry like takes him under his wing, quote unquote. And
you know what? It's not just the laugh. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure it's a combination of two things. I think he gets the nickname Evil, one because he has that freaky ass laugh, but also because he has a really twisted sense of humor. Like even before he becomes a vampire, and I think that's where it's supposed to come from.
But I wish it was his jokes were cleverer. Like I didn't really laugh at anything he was saying because it was clever or funny. I was more just like, that's a weird way to say that very strange line. Like when he's a vampire, I was laughing more because he was so overboard with his performance and delivery, and then the lines were funnier because he was also more confident in those sequences. But I wish that he was like more clever and sarcastic before that, you know? Like everything that he said, I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's something one of my dumbass friends would have said when we were in middle school, which I guess is the point. But I didn't particularly. I feel like the guy playing him, he could have been delivering some really killer lines and stuff, and they should have been writing them for him. Like I said, again, I feel like the script and the performances are at odds at different times. You know, sometimes I'm not sure if the actor just isn't doing enough, or if the script isn't doing enough. And that's the conflict I often find myself at with a lot of the things, for the specific human characters in this film, outside of the broad concepts that I enjoyed. But I hate to keep bringing this back to things that I really didn't like, but overall though, Eddie was one of the things that I really did get on board with. Like one of his best lines is the last one he has where he's like, "You're so cool, Brewster." That delivery's killer.
Yeah.
And what you told me about the sequel made me really disappointed, because if they would have gone in that direction, I probably would have been 10 times. I probably would have actually watched the sequel.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, he's not in the sequel. He was supposed to be in the sequel. He's sort of set up at the end of this movie. He was supposed to come back and be the villain of the sequel. He didn't want to do it for whatever reason.
Like I said, he had other things in his mouth. He had other priorities, so you know.
Not till the 90s.
Well, he was preparing, you know.
He did go on to do quite a bit of gay porn under a pseudonym, but you know that voice and the way he looks kind of gave it away. Anyway, he didn't want to do it, so the sequel is about. I haven't actually watched the sequel yet, but from what I understand, Charlie, I think, goes to college. Then he gets attacked by Jerry's sister, who comes for revenge.
Oh, see, that's so typical, and yeah, that sounds like the sequel to The Howling, which is no good, which had Christopher Lee in it.
Well, it's one of those things, you know. They had a really good idea for a sequel, but the guy who it depended on didn't want to come back, and they weren't going to not make the sequel because the first one made a lot of money. So they were like, "All right."
See, this was successful. All right. See, because this totally strikes me as like this was of the moment, and again, I think conceptually, all of that was really good. Like to do a real proper vampire movies for the 80s.
That's why yes, and that's ultimately the thing I like best about this movie, is that it's a proper vampire movie for the 80s, and I don't know of a lot of. Anyway, that's why I was having trouble. I was struggling at the end of the last review trying to categorize this movie. I don't know if you counted it as a cult classic, because at the time in 1985, super successful, and I think the sequel just kind of killed all the hype and people forgot about it until the remake came along. But in the middle it kind of went to more of a cult status. It's weird that something starts out successful and then becomes culty after that. It's not usually the case, but that is kind of the trajectory that this had.
Yeah, and I think that's just because it is super of the moment. You know, it came, it had its moment, and then the people who remembered it, and that's the way, and that's the legacy it's had. And I definitely think that
that line you mentioned, you're so cool, Brewster. That's kind of the iconic line from this film. He says it twice. Once early on in the film.
Yeah, he says it when he's in human mode too.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened. Charlie somehow embarrassed himself in public, and then he just
he was a dick to his girlfriend again in a really nonsensical way that he should have been thinking for more than 2 seconds about, and then she threw a pie in his face or something. No, that was later.
Something like that, yeah. But then it's like, oh, you're so cool, Brewster. I was like,
yeah.
that's hilarious. One of these days, Bill, you're going to do something embarrassing to yourself in public, and I'm just going to be like, you're so cool, Worcester.
I'm just gonna be like, wow, we're in public. This is so weird. Like, how did this happen? Like you'll just have appeared like Professor X at the end of the Wolverine. Everybody will have stopped in mid moment. I'm just gonna be like, oh my god, this is some wild shit.
It's definitely a long game kind of plan, but I will pick my moment.
I see. Well, good. But
and
yeah,
then I'll
no.
turn into a vampire.
Yeah, perhaps it'll be in the context of me not believing that there are vampires and there are truly vampires. Or maybe I think that there are vampires, but there aren't really vampires. I would go about it a lot more intelligently than this kid, trust me. But, yeah.
Okay, now I'm fascinated. Okay, Bill, you're yourself. You're no different than you are right now. Vampire moves in next door. What do you do?
I probably wouldn't do anything. I probably wouldn't even realize he was a vampire, to be honest. I would go about my life until I guess he killed me. Probably. That's probably how it would go down. I don't snoop on my neighbors at all. I do not care.
Okay. Assume it happened kind of the way that it happened in this movie. You're not necessarily snooping on your neighbor.
Never would have happened in a million years. I didn't buy that at all either. Like, he sees them carrying in something. It didn't even look like a coffin to me. It was a very oddly designed coffin. Like, I feel like if it was bigger and more boxy, I would have bought his reaction more. But it just looked like a big old-timey box. So I didn't know why he was so about stopping in the. He was about to fuck his girlfriend of a year. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you're an idiot. And there's this weird-looking box next door. Like, what the hell?
That's not even the part that really convinced him, though. I mean, the part that convinced him is he just happened to see Jerry, making out with one of his victims in the next door window, and then he saw like the fucking nails.
Right, well, that's where he figured out he was a vampire. Like, he just thought something weird was going on prior to that. Yeah. If I had seen that, like, but again, I wouldn't have been looking in like that. Probably, I would have been like, oh, yeah, there are people making out. I'm not going to keep looking.
Hypothetically, let's assume you're not trying to snoop on you just happen to glance out your window, or maybe you're out in the pool or something, and you see a vampire in the window next door. What do you do? Well, what's your game plan? How do you approach the situation?
I would probably try to gather evidence quietly and try to just. I would wait to see if I would have to make a move. Like, I mean, if he killed the girl right there, that's definitely a bad position to be put in, especially if he sees you. I mean, that was the other thing too. He kept staring. Like, obviously, look away. Like, you don't want to watch the murder. I guess there's like some of that vampiric hypnotism going on there, but
especially when there's all these reports going on around that there's like a serial killer out there ripping girls' heads off.
Yeah.
Which I assumed was a way for him to keep them from coming back as vampires.
Yeah, I didn't get enough of how the rules worked here. I guess it's just you don't bite them enough until they die, and I guess that's usually how it works too. But I guess that's what's going on there. But I didn't get the sense that, like, oh, if they're killed while they've been drained, they won't come back as some other creature. Some continuities do that. Have you ever seen that, where it's like even the corpse that they've left behind will come back as like a zombie or something?
Yeah. I've always just preferred the idea that the vampire can choose whether he wants to convert somebody or.
Yeah, that's what I've always liked as well. So I didn't get the sense that that's what was going on, but that's more interesting if that's what was.
Or some continuities do the whole, vampire cutting themselves open and making the victim drink their blood thing.
Yeah, that's not here. They do it a lot more simply. I like what they do here better than that, because that's so complicated. What they do here is just you get bitten, and if you don't die, you're a vampire. Because it feels more like a disease then. Where it's like, oh, you've been just minimal contact, and suddenly you're infected.
Yeah. Did you like the girl?
No, not at all. I hated her. She was terrible. She was not as bad as Charlie, because she was less obnoxious. And I liked her when she was a vampire, because then she had an air of confidence and was somewhat putting on a performance. But man, she was intolerable the rest of the time. And they had zero chemistry together. That's an unhealthy high school romance that the quicker they end that, the better the rest of their lives will be. That's doomed from the start.
I don't know if she's in the sequel or not.
Yeah, no, I did not care for her, but I didn't care for him either. So it was they came as a package to me. Uh, so, and also, was she wearing a wig, or when she get bit by a vampire, did her hair grow? Because she looked nothing like the woman in the painting, except a little bit in the eyes, I guess, and the haircut's kind of similar. Except the hair color is completely different, and otherwise they look nothing alike.
It's an interesting movie did that before Dracula came along and did it in the 90s.
It is, yeah. Well, I wonder if some other version of Dracula had played it that way prior, because it is more Bram Stoker's, as in the 1994 version, or whatever year that came out. That wasn't 94.
As far as Dracula is concerned, I'm pretty sure that movie was the introduction of the idea of him being a
So yeah, they would have either taken that from this, or if this got that from some other vampire thing that we're not familiar with. But
it might have been. It might crop up in some other.
It was underdeveloped, I thought. Like that was one of the things where it's like I feel like the satire could have been better, or even just that doesn't have to be the satire. It could have just been the straight up horror stuff. Like I would have liked to have known when he came from and who she was. Why was he so infatuated with her? What does Amy really represent outside of the looks, if anything, that captures him so much, that reminds him so much of that woman? Because again, I didn't get enough of the visual symbolism. What is it? God damn it! I'm losing my words. I'm so fucking tired. Similarity. There we go. God. Between the two women. And again, did you notice that her hair grows out super long and blonde after she's turned into a vampire?
Yeah.
That was weird.
I think that's just, if there was actually any thought put behind it, I think it's probably just a play on the whole. In movies, when a chick gets turned into a vampire, suddenly she's far more voluptuous than she was before.
Yeah, that was fine. Like she puts on this super skin tight outfit, and you can see her nipples and everything. So yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. But I feel like it would have made more sense if they had like shown that he had put a wig on her, because then that would have been creepier too. That he's trying to dress her up to maybe look more like how the woman that he remembers looked. Like that would have been cool, maybe. But I don't know that's not explained at all. It's just she shows up with longer hair.
I didn't actually pay attention to the length of her hair the first time I watched it, to be honest. So I'm not even really sure, but maybe
it distracted me, because because I think it distracted me more because I liked the design of her vampire mode, because she had the Resident Evil mouth. Or Resident Evil's not the way to describe it. You ever seen Blade 2? The villain in that, the extended jaw, it kind of reminded me of that.
Like those new vampires who have the fucking predator mandibles.
Yeah. That was cool, and that reminded me. Nomad was his name. That reminded me of Nomad. We should talk about the Blade movies at some point. Those are cool. So I like vampire things, D. I don't hate them all. Fuck you.
Is that the? I never said you hated vampire things. I just said that you're more.
I know what you said.
I said that you're more of a werewolf guy, and I think that might be part of the one of the factors that contributed to you enjoying the film less than I did.
I don't know. I'm not saying it's totally wrong, but I think that had this been more successful at setting itself apart as a vampire thing, or even just being more developed in what it was, even playing on other stuff, I would have enjoyed it fine as a vampire thing. I think I will agree with you that I guess vampire things need to try harder for me in order for them to work, and this just didn't feel like it was trying hard enough. It felt a little too by the numbers,
Yeah.
I think that was a lot of it for me.
I can see that. One thing that kind of distracted me about it is that while watching the film, I realized that Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman plagiarized the fuck out of this movie.
That is very Fright Night, isn't it?
It's basically the same plot, only with the Wolfman.
The whole thing is also very Rear Window, and this is more Rear Window than Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman.
There's only like one scene where, there's a couple of moments where he looks out his window and at the other house, but the only scene
it's that for a much shorter amount of time than Rear Window is, but it's Rear Window for a minute. I feel like if this was Disturbia, you ever see that? Which is sort of a remake of Rear Window. And I actually like that because it's not straight up just a remake. It's its own thing, and it does its own thing. And the villain's really cool in that movie. I feel like...
I just stick to Rear Window. Got less Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, he's not great. He's very Shia LaBeouf. He's Shia LaBeoufing it all over the place, so that's really the issue there. I feel like if you did that scenario with a vampire and just stuck with that aesthetic, though, where it's the two houses and it's more of a subtle kind of game of cat and mouse, as opposed to this where it's, you know, more traditional in that it's just a gradual build to the over the top monster action, you know. I feel like that would be cool. I'm not saying this had to do that. I'm just saying that's another cool idea that something in the future could play with. But Dylan, do you want to talk a little more about Roddy McDowall? I feel like we mentioned him as a positive for me, and then we kind of started talking about a bunch of shit that I didn't like. So do you want to go back to him, or did you say everything you had to say about him? Because I also just wanted to say that
he's fucking great in this.
Well, yeah, definitely. But I feel like what he did really well was he wasn't an asshole. Because we talked about how selfish he is, but he's not an asshole. You know what I mean? In terms of his behavior, he's still a proper English gentleman in the way he talks and the way he kind of interacts with the people, and he can and by the end of it, his heart is in the right place. But you know, he's trying to drink away all this horrible stuff that he's found out about what these kids are going through. He's actively trying to ignore the fact that children's lives are in danger. You know, I mean, that bit where, and also that bit where he knows that Charlie's right, and then he just drives off without vindicating him and telling his friends that he also knows that he's a vampire. Because they still think that he's crazy after that, which is why Eddie gets turned into a vampire. So that means that that's technically Peter Vincent's fault, which I think was the realization that he had in that scene. All that's really good.
I would have to look into this some more, because off the top of my head, I don't know every movie that Roddy McDowall's ever been in. But just from memory, this might be like my favorite non-Planet of the Apes thing that he does, because conceptually it's just a brilliant idea for a character. He's got a really good arc, and he just plays the fuck out of it. And you know,
yeah, everything is in place for him to just do a good job, and I think his performance is the thing that sells it. I feel like if you give this script to somebody who isn't selling it like he's selling it, it would have been another one of the performances that I feel fell flat in this film, like Charlie or his mother in particular. I didn't mention her; she's terrible. You know, any number of characters that I just don't think got the material.
Luckily,
he absolutely got the material. Not only did he get the material, he was like, "Oh, I know what to do with this," and I think his time with Planet of the Apes really prepared him for something like this. You know, I think maybe he related to Peter Vincent a little bit, being typecast and being remembered for that one very specific role, and you know, not really be able to stretch your wings in Hollywood because of the limitations put on you by your history. And the stigma of the science fiction and horror kind of genre and nerd culture and all that. Like, that was all really good, and he played that really well, and I think that his experience and all of that helped that.
What's really interesting about that is that he's clearly playing a Peter Cushing analog. I mean,
yeah, of course.
Those movies that he's supposedly in that we get brief glances at in this look like something Hammer made in the 70s, you know? Like,
well, I mean, they're like scene for scene. Like, the scene where he kills the vampire in that one bit is exactly the same as when Peter Cushing kills, I can't remember which girl it is in Horror of Dracula.
But he's clearly playing the Peter Cushing type role, but his attitude towards his typecasting and the position he's been put in as an actor is much more Christopher Lee.
It's more Christopher Lee-esque, yeah. That's interesting.
Lee, as fucking wonderful as he was at it, and as much as I wish he had made 25 more, he hated being in the Dracula sequels.
However,
he felt that the material had been done, and that he felt, and this is true from what I understand, that they were just writing plots and then putting Dracula in afterwards.
Yeah, well, I mean, his not only was he totally right, but I feel like he would have been excited about them had they been doing something with the character, you know? Because I mean, I feel like it was just a matter of the material there, you know? And he acted the shit out of it.
As much as he hated doing it, it's not like he ever turned it down. No.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what we have here with Peter Vincent, you know? Just somebody who is as conflicted about the legacy they've left behind and trying to reconcile that and find their own place in the world inside of that, and finding, you know, a real a zest for life again by going through this horrible thing, and, you know, proving that he's got more going on in his heart than just selfish drinking and making money.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, his arc was the real through line here for me. That was the thing that made me go like, okay, of all the crap that this is surrounded by that I didn't really care sitting through, I got the intention here, and therefore I'm able to kind of see what the rest of this is supposed to be. You know, I get the concept here and what we were really trying to say about the horror genre through him. You know, you know, it's not always great, but it is something that's worth fighting for, is kind of the idea with him. And I think that was supposed to be the idea with Charlie too, but man, they fucked that up.
And again, the idea that in this era dominated by slasher films mostly, nothing wrong with that, but the old monsters, the traditional monsters, still have
they can still be scary, yeah.
Some blood in them, so to speak.
Absolutely, literally and figuratively. That above all else, I really liked that this movie got at. But I really only think it was successful with it in the sense of Roddy McDowall, and I think a lot of it was his performance. But I feel like if they had gotten maybe more of a cast that got this script, it could have been at the very least better. But just nothing else was on the same caliber to me as what they did with him. It really felt like this island in the middle of all this other stuff going on, you know? And again, maybe it was supposed to feel that way, but not in the same way that I think I took from it. But that was the one thing that really worked for me. So D, what else did you want to cover? We've been going for a while, and I've said most of the things that I want to say. So if you've got any other places that you want to take us to, I'm willing to go there with you. But
I'm pretty sure we talked about all the characters. There aren't really that many.
It's not a huge cast, no. And this is another movie like It, where it's like there's not a whole lot of adults, quote unquote, in it. It's mostly younger characters. There's more than It, and we're dealing with older kids, so it's not even as noticeable.
And much less plot to cover. I mean, it's
and it's a lot more by the numbers than something like It, obviously. Intentional, and I'm not even just saying that as a criticism, like I've been saying, like that's largely intentional.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's trying to do the same thing that Stephen King did with Salem's Lot. And I think Salem's Lot did it better.
Yeah, I also think that all the stuff you told me about that story, seeing this made me want to go to those.
In that it's an attempt to take the sort of Dracula story and then bring it to America in the modern age. Now, for Stephen King, that was 70s small town America, and for this movie, it's 80s suburbia. You know. I think that's on that same theme. The difference is this is a bit more personal, where it all revolves around this one kid who gets sucked into a confrontation with this vampire, and the whole movie revolves around the kid trying to do something about this vampire. Meanwhile, the vampire, you know, fucking with this kid that he's going to kill because he knows too much. It's very personal in that way, where in Salem's Lot is about the vampire curse sort of spreading out and infecting an entire town. So there's a different end game, but they both have a similar starting place, I guess.
Like I said, they're both playing with similar themes and concepts, and that's a lot of what I liked about this movie was those themes and concepts, and in execution, it was all a lot of mixed carrying out of those ideas. I should start with the miniseries, right? The 70s miniseries? There's a 70s miniseries and a 90s movie. Is that the way it breaks down?
I think the movie I don't know if it was 90s or somewhere in the 2000s. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I haven't actually watched the movie myself because I heard it wasn't very good. I am interested just because Rutger Hauer is the vampire.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's great casting.
It is great casting, and from what I've heard, the movie doesn't live up to the good
Nah, that's
casting.
unfortunate.
But there is talk from Stephen King about another adaptation perhaps being in the works. So
I hope they do it more like the '70s miniseries that you described, where the vampire is not a man; he's like a Nosferatu monster that can't go out and even at night interact in normal society because he's a big monster.
I don't think they will, just
Damn it.
because the book, they're going to be more faithful to the book. Ever since 1980 when The Shining happened, Stephen King he fights for a little bit more creative control in
Right.
terms of keeping things closer to the book because he was very pissed off with how that went down.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. By many of his adaptations right after that, he would write himself. Like, he wrote the screenplay for Pet Sematary, and pretty sure he wrote some of the other ones. Um, sometimes to good success. Pet Sematary is really great. Sometimes to not such great success.
Like the Shining miniseries,
Yeah.
which I haven't seen that, but I've heard it was bad. Aren't there like plant monsters in that or something?
Yeah, I'm up to that part in the book, and the way they do it in the book is so much better.
Oh, there's
So
plant monsters in the book too. Fuck.
well, what they are, they're hedge animals. They're topiaries, and because the whole place is haunted, they come to life at one point.
Oh,
But
okay.
the way it's done in the miniseries, you actually see them move. It's like super bad 90s CG. The way they're done in the book is a lot more like the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. Like he'll look away, and then when he looks back, they've moved.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot creepier.
Yeah,
But anyway,
I don't know. They didn't do it that way in the miniseries. I don't know how we got on this tangent. We were wrapping up on Fright Night.
the other horror movies that play with concepts of the genre. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought that. I mean, man, I was just super conflicted on this. The things I liked about it, I really liked, but the things I did not like, I wanted to fucking hit my head against a wall. And I feel bad because I knew that you were excited to talk about this and gauge it with another horror fan, and I was sad that the things that it was trying to execute didn't play for me a lot of the time. So
No, I mean,
yeah, I didn't want to come on here and disagree with you and have this dynamic, but
Oh no, I think this has been actually kind of fascinating.
yeah, we've never had something like this before. This is our first real difference of opinion episode. Like usually, you and I are largely in agreement, or if not, we largely see where each other are coming from. But this is one where it's like we are really on different ends of the spectrum here. Like, you definitely have you definitely like this movie and the things that it's trying to do, and I'm just like, I like the things it's trying to do. I don't think it gets there most of the time.
Yeah, I think it stumbles in a few places in terms of the execution, and I think that obviously bothered you a lot more than it did me. And I think that's pretty much where it falls down.
Indeed.
For me, though, as a person, I like two things. Well, I mean, I like more than two things, but two of the things that I like are 80s movies, and I don't just mean movies that came out in the 80s. I mean movies that are like super 80s. And
This really had that going for it. Like the aesthetics all there. Like it felt very Terminator as well.
yeah, it's a very 80s movie. I like that, and I also like a good vampire story. And this combined the two in a way that I don't know if I've seen done before. How many vampire movies are there from the 80s? A lot don't come to mind.
See,
Just
I
off the top.
don't know if I have that. I feel like I've seen a lot of them. And and maybe I'm making some up in my head, or I'm combining some from other eras. But, like, there's that Jim Carrey vampire movie. I got vibe, and this is probably better than that. But that's 80s, and there's elements of that feels like, if that was before this, it's similar to this.
I'm looking at a list of 80s vampire movies right now. I don't know why Graveyard Shift is on the list. That's a movie about a giant bat, not a vampire. But I'm looking at a list of vampire movies that came out in it. It's another Stephen King adaptation. Not a great one. Although it does have a pretty good performance from Brad Dourif in it. Anyway, I'm looking at a list here on Google of 80s vampire movies, and a lot of it leans more to the satirical. There's
Yeah.
not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of like the only other one on this list that really jumps out to me, one that I hear a lot of good things about, although I've never watched it myself, and I probably should, is The Lost Boys from 1987.
See, that's another huge one that also plays with a lot of tropes. That's more serious than this is, but I think that it still walks that line between being a little more satirical and still being a real scary movie.
Yeah, but those are like two that I'm seeing on this list. Is it like really memorable? Where I mean, there's other ones that are. I mean, Monster Squad and Transylvania 65000 is on this list.
Yeah,
but,
of course,
neither,
the Monster Squad I remember is a big one.
Neither of those.
I'm not saying there's a lot, but I remember them.
This movie though is really the perfect storm of the vampire story and that like super 80s vibe. Like it encapsulates the 80s. It's 80s on film. It's practically seeping out of the screen at you. Like this is the 80s.
Yeah, and again, that's
especially when they're in that like disco bar that might as well be tech noir.
Oh yeah, I really liked that scene. Yeah, like I really liked the music there and the atmosphere. Like yeah, that's all that's all good stuff. I'm so conflicted. Like I love all the 80s-ness. I love the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Damn it. Like I wish I liked the characters more and the things the way things go more. That all of that would really hit home for me. But it just kind of feels like, oh well, that's nice, but I wish there was more to it, and I wish I could really get excited about it because of what else is here. The soundtrack is the one thing that I'll probably go back to above all else with this movie. That and maybe I'll watch clips of Roddy McDowall online, but I might have to watch the sequel just for he's in it, right?
Who, Roddy McDowall?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll have to watch it probably because I really liked his character. But
yeah, I want to watch it too at some point. I just haven't yet. It's actually available on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies that's super hard to track down a physical copy of, but it's readily available on YouTube. So I don't know how the quality is, but
yeah. But I'm just gonna watch it for him though, and everything I've heard about the plot of the sequel on Charlie's side does not make it sound like I'm gonna have a fun time.
Yeah.
So, oof.
I know at one point there's a vampire on rollerblades, so that's
more over the top. I wish that would have been in this movie. I would have enjoyed more stuff like that. But anyway, we were wrapping up though. So yeah, that was our difference of opinion episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We certainly did it.
If, like me, you're a person who enjoys vampire stories as well as super 80s things, I would recommend checking this out.
If you like this stuff, I feel like you probably should watch it just for the special effects and Roddy McDowall's performance.
Even if you only like one of those things, vampire stories or 80s, super 80s-ness, I would recommend checking it out.
Or Roddy McDowall.
Honestly, I'd recommend anybody checking it out just because it's really interesting and kind of polarizing, as it turns out.
I don't know if you'll like it. If you're like me, you'll probably be hitting your head against the wall most of the time when the people are talking. But the monster stuff is mostly solid, and again, the arc for Roddy McDowall is really strong. So again, I'm conflicted. So I don't know. Watch it for yourselves. Hit your head against the wall at your own risk. That kind of business. That's how we do things here. It's a risky business. We should talk about that movie. No, let's not.
It's like a Tom Cruise movie.
No, let's not talk about a Tom Cruise movie. We should talk about his Mummy at some point, but I think we should do like a commentary on that because I don't know if you or I will ever sit down and watch that on our own in any capacity to then discuss it with any kind of intellectual proficiency without just watching it in front of us. So we should do that at some point. But
I'm really interested in that movie, like leading up to its release, and then as soon as it hit theaters, I was like, I don't really want to go see that.
Well, I thought about it for more than 2 seconds, and I was just like, oh, I don't really care about The Mummy or Tom Cruise, and this Dark Universe doesn't look really like what I want from these characters, so fuck it, I'm not going to go see it.
But maybe now that you enjoyed the Boris Karloff Mummy more on your last watch,
I did.
Maybe you'd like it now, Bill.
Probably not. I liked the Hammer Mummy when I revisited that recently more than I even did originally, which that was my Mummy prior. And that movie's fucking great. There's a scene where a muck-covered mummy strangles a man. That's fucking good shit. Mm-hmm. I like that stuff, man. We should talk about that movie at some point.
You gotta love mummies covered in muck.
It's great. It's good stuff. So yeah. Wow, what an adventure. We are going to be discussing another horror movie, though. We're on to other macabre pastors, Moors, in this case, because Dylan has forced me to sit down and watch stuff the past 2 weeks, and now it is my turn to do the same, although these are things that I think he has seen already, so it's not going to be the... I hadn't seen either of the things that I sat down to watch these last 2 weeks, the It miniseries or Fright Night, so... Next week...
Not in a long while. I'm looking forward to revisiting it.
Oh, yeah, okay. I revisited this film a lot, so it'll be interesting to see how... It's been a little bit, though, so I'm interested to see how I react to it this time.
I never really had the opportunity to revisit it just because I didn't have a copy of it until very recently. I actually did acquire it. So.
Oh, okay, there you go. So we're ready to go. That film is, of course... The early, I cannot remember the exact year. It might be 1980 on the dot.
No, it's 81.
It's 81. Sure. Okay, I was gonna say it's either 80 or 81. So 1981's An American Werewolf in London. Oh my god, I'm so excited! This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Hugely influential to me. A lot of the stuff that I've created in my attempts at creating stuff. It is inspired by this and John Landis and many other things.
No. You don't say.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that and many other things when we discuss An American Werewolf in London next week. So yeah. Until then, though, I am Bill Worster, a.k.a. Zazibar.
I'm Super DM64. Join us next week when we bring another classic monster into the 80s.
Indeed.
1980. By the way, good year for horror films. I'm looking at a list right now. Holy shit.
Yeah. And you couldn't see us because it was a podcast, Colonel Hogan.